Okay, hello everyone and welcome to this revision video on the topic of Germany and depression, and this video focuses on the establishment of Hitler's dictatorship between January 1933 and August 1934. As part of this video, we're going to talk about the Reichstag Fire, we're going to look at the Enabling Act, we're going to talk about how Hitler eliminated all kinds of political opposition, including trade unions. We're going to look at the threat that Ernst Rohm, the leader of the SA, posed to Adolf Hitler and how that was countered during the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934. And then we're going to finish off talking about the death of President Hindenburg and how Adolf Hitler assumed the role of the Führer in Germany after a referendum, from where he took the control of the army through the Oath of Allegiance, and he became an all-powerful dictator. So let's find out more. Let's go. Okay there, and so what we're going to do is going to start off with looking at how Hitler established his dictatorship. So we were learning about how Hitler was appointed the Chancellor of Germany on the 30th of January 1933, and how this had much to do with the political intrigue of people like Franz von Papen and Alfred Hugenberg. And there's a picture there of Hitler's first cabinet, and it only contained two other Nazis. So there's only 3 Nazis in the cabinet, which includes Hitler himself, and the 2 other Nazis in the cabinet were Hermann Goering and Wilhelm Frick. Now, Hitler was appointed Chancellor, but when he was appointed Chancellor, it's really important to understand that there were many limits to his power. So when he becomes the Chancellor, which is like a Prime Minister really, on the 30th of January 1933, he was not a dictator. He was not a dictator. And remember that he'd actually been appointed Chancellor because they felt that they could control Hitler better if he was the Chancellor than just being the leader of the Nazis. And in particular, there was a sense that the SA could be brought under control because there was lots of violence and chaos on the streets. Now, von Papen famously told Hindenburg that he had Hitler, quote, in his pocket, and that, quote, within 2 months, we will have pushed Hitler so far into a corner that he'll squeak like a mouse. Now, obviously, this was going to be proved massively wrong, and there was a huge underestimation of what Hitler was like. So only 3 of the 12 in the cabinet were Nazis. Hindenburg could still get rid of Hitler at any time, and there were still forces within Germany that could oppose Hitler and the Nazis, like trade unions, other political parties, and the state parliaments that could also restrict Hitler's power as well. So how did Hitler establish his dictatorship? Well, I think it's really important to have a good timeline, understanding of how Hitler did this. So he was appointed Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933. So the first big event to be aware of is the Reichstag Fire. So on the 27th of February 1933, the Reichstag Fire is destroyed by fire. This was blamed on the Dutch communist Marinus van der Lubbe, and the Nazis used the fire to spread propaganda about the danger of communism. In the wake of the Reichstag Fire, 4,000 communists were arrested. And what Hitler did is he persuaded President Hindenburg to pass the Decree for the Protection of People and the State. Now this law is sometimes known as the Reichstag Fire Decree. And what this did is it reduced people's rights and suspended actually parts of the Weimar Constitution. And what it basically did is it allowed people to be rounded up, arrested, and put in prison, and property confiscated, things like that. And obviously this was then used to crack down on the communists and arrest the communist members of the Reichstag, things like that. After the Reichstag Fire, there was the elections of the 5th of March 1933. And this is really an interesting election result because it's not a fair election result, and we see the Nazi vote increase quite a lot. So they go from 196 seats to 288. But of course, the Nazis intimidate political opponents during this time. They'd taken control of the media, and they had a strong anti-communist message, and they were able to use the events of the Reichstag Fire to present the communists as a danger. And it's really interesting, I think, to note that despite all of this, the Nazis didn't get over 50% of the vote. They got 44% of the vote and 288 seats. And it's interesting to note that the communists still did quite well. They got 4.8 million votes and still had 81 seats. So the number of seats reduced from 100 that they had in November 1932, but they still had quite a lot of power. So after these elections, that gave Hitler more control over the Reichstag. And what he was able to do, only 2.5 weeks after the elections, he was able to then use this increased support that he had to push through the Enabling Act. Now, the Enabling Act is what basically makes Hitler a dictator in Germany, because what the Enabling Act does is basically a law which is passed, which gives Hitler the powers to be a dictator. Now, he initially says he's just going to use this for 4 years, but then obviously this just continues. So this is a real turning point in terms of the setting up of a dictatorship, hence why it's highlighted in yellow. Now, the Enabling Act gave Hitler the powers to be a dictator, and in order to have these powers, he needed a 2/3 majority within the Reichstag. Now, he achieved this by banning the communists from voting. So when the Reichstag re-met, they actually re-met in an opera house called the Kroll Opera House, because obviously the Reichstag had burnt down. But he also managed to persuade the Catholic Centre Party and the National Party, the DNVP, to support the Enabling Act, made a few concessions to the Catholic Centre Party, and the National Party were kind of on board because they supported Hitler's sort of right-wing policies anyway. So it passed 444 to 94 votes, and also the SA were patrolling the Kroll Opera House and intimidating people to vote for the law as well. So the Enabling Act passed, and it gives Hitler the power to be a dictator. So once this happens, what Hitler then does is he uses the powers that he gets under the Enabling Act to get rid of opposition within Germany. So in May 1933, trade unions are got rid of, so this restricts the rights of workers. Leaders of trade unions are arrested, and all trade unions are merged into what's known as the German Labour Front, or the DAF. So basically, the German Labour Front is there to sort of represent the rights of workers, but it's a Nazi organisation. So what this means is that the rights of workers to campaign for better conditions, or that they could go on strike, they don't have those powers anymore. In July 1933, Germany becomes a one-party state, so a law bans all political parties. Now, the SPD, the Social Democrats, and the KPD, the Communists, had already been broken up, but it also means that the Centre Party and the National Party, who of course had supported Hitler in the Enabling Act, they're also broken up. So Germany was now a one-party state. This then, in January 1934, is the state parliaments get abolished, and then the other crucial event. Pretty much by the start of 1934, Hitler's got control of pretty much all elements of society. But the one place where he could still have had his power restricted was the threat of the SA. And that's why the Night of the Long Knives on the 30th of June 1934 is so crucial. And that is when Hitler uses the SS to destroy the leadership of the SA, preventing a potential what would have been known as a second revolution challenge from the leader of the SA, who was called Ernst Röhm. So it's really important to think about what was significant about the Reichstag Fire. So this is a key event in helping Hitler set up a dictatorship in Germany. Now, most historians do agree that this man, Marinus van der Lubbe, who's pictured, was responsible, but the Nazis made the most of the event. And there are a lot of conspiracy theories around this, and some ideas that perhaps the Nazis made the fire sort of worse, or they didn't put the fire out, or they started their own fires. But what is absolutely undoubtable is the Reichstag Fire allowed the Nazis to destroy the opposition of the communists within Germany. And this cartoon, which was published in Britain, I think reflects this really well. And it has President Hindenburg saying to Hitler, the Red Peril, this is a heaven-sent opportunity, my lad. If you can't be a dictator now, you never will. So this is absolutely crucial for the Nazis being able to present the communists as dangerous and destroying them through propaganda, and Hitler obviously persuading Hindenburg to pass the Law for Protection of People and the State, or otherwise known as the Reichstag Fire Decree, which then allows him to arrest communists, etc. So what about the significance of the Night of the Long Knives? Well, the SA in 1934 was definitely a growing threat to Hitler. And this is because Ernst Röhm, the leader of the SA, wanted a so-called second revolution, which would have seen the Nazis doing more to help the working class. Now, the SA numbered 3 million men, and they were personally loyal to Ernst Röhm. And remember, most of the SA were working class people. So Röhm, he didn't like the fact that so much of the Nazi party was linked to rich industrialists, people like Alfred Hugenberg and landowners, and he wanted the Nazis to do more to help out the poorest in society. The army felt threatened by the SA because the main German army was worried that the SA had become so powerful that it would replace the army, and the army was led by Hermann Göring, who was another powerful Nazi. And SS leaders such as Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich didn't like Ernst Röhm either and wanted the SS instead to grow in power. So basically, Hitler was facing a real threat from the SA. The SA had become too powerful. So what actually happened is Hitler arranged a meeting with Röhm and 100 other SA leaders at a hotel in Bavaria. And when they arrived, Röhm and other senior officers of the SA were arrested and imprisoned, and eventually many of them were shot. Röhm himself was shot. Franz von Pappen's office was searched and some of his staff was killed, and Göring told the German public that Röhm had been killed to stop him planning a revolution to replace Hitler. So this event basically took out the leadership of the SA, and would then allow the SA to be brought under control and essentially under control of the SS within the Nazi police state that had been created. So it's a crucial event, this, and you can see here this very famous cartoon which was published in Britain in 1934 by David Lowe. The cartoon is called They Salute with Both Hands. And the Night of the Long Knives is highly significant because by carrying this act out, Hitler gained the support and trust of the army. President Hindenburg was happy with the action because it showed that Hitler was showing his sort of loyalty to the more conservative forces within Germany. Most German people approved because they felt the SA had been getting out of control. The power of the SA was reduced, so those that stayed in the SA were now under control of the SS, which was more loyal to Hitler. Victor Lutz, who was loyal to Hitler, became the new SA leader, but really after this event, the SA sort of reduces in its power, and it's all really about the SS, the so-called black shirts. The event showed how ruthless Hitler could be. He passed a law on the 3rd of July 1934 saying that Night of the Long Knives was legal and that no one could be punished for it. And von Papen could see that his power and influence had completely gone, and he resigned as Vice Chancellor afterwards. So this cartoon, just to explain this, the people that have got their hands up, that's the SA. You can see Hermann Göring there, who was the leader of the army and the leading Nazi. He's shown alongside Hitler. The caption on Hitler's arms reads the double cross, because double cross means a betrayal. Underneath Hitler, that's Heinrich Himmler, who's leader of the SS. So this cartoon very much shows that Himmler and Göring are the key individuals to gain from this, the leader of the army, leader of the SS. The piece of paper reads Hitler's unkept promises. That's a reference to the fact that Hitler had promised to do more to help out the working class people in the Nazis' 25-point program and within their sort of propaganda in their election campaigns. And those feet that are sticking out in the bottom right represent the killed SA leadership, including Ernst Rohm. So the only thing left that was really holding Hitler's power back was the fact that President Hindenburg was still there, and President Hindenburg, I suppose, could have moved to get rid of Hitler, although I think that would have been pretty difficult to do by sort of July 1934. Hindenburg was aging anyway, and on the 2nd of August 1934, Hindenburg died. Sometimes people say, you know, was he murdered? Was he killed? Was he done away with? I don't think he was. I mean, he was 87, so it was perfectly reasonable that he would have died of natural causes. After the death of President Hindenburg, what Hitler does is he combines the role of Chancellor and President, and he becomes the Führer. Now, on the 19th of August, a referendum is held about whether the German people agree with it, and 90% of voters say they approved of Hitler becoming Führer. Only 4.5 million people in Germany voted against it, with 45 million approving of it. In the wake of this, we can see this is a very common image of Hitler. We get the development of this idea of the cult of the Führer. And again, much of propaganda within Nazi Germany is invested into Hitler's leadership and this idea of him as a Führer. The sort of German word Führer sort of means like a guide or a pilot or leader, that type of meaning. And afterwards, in August 1934, the army themselves take an oath of allegiance. Hitler becomes the actual commander-in-chief of Germany's armed forces, and with the army taking this oath of loyalty, that gives him control of the army as well. Hitler will then go on to make Germany a strong and powerful military country through rearmament. That would really begun in secret in 1933. He would reveal open rearmament by the start of 1935, and as part of the oath, the army agreed to stay out of politics. So Hitler, by August 1934, has become a dictator of Germany, and would go on through the Nazi propaganda to be revered and almost worshipped by many people within Nazi Germany during this time. So that is the story of how Hitler was able to become a dictator in Germany. Some key events there to remember, particularly the Reichstag Fire, the enabling law, and the Night of the Long Knives. Thanks very much for listening. Bye-bye.